Good morning and welcome to my new series on YouTube and new podcast I'm starting called First Available, where I get to come to you and talk to you about disc golf stuff nice and early every Monday morning. So this is a new concept that I came up with a few weeks ago. I decided that I really wanted to hop into doing a podcast, and that would also give me a video to put up on Monday mornings for my YouTube channel if you consume the content there, give you guys something to listen to on your way to and from work, maybe if you're going in first shift or if you're coming off third shift. Just talking disc golf stuff nice and early, especially as the Pro Tour gets kicked off here as the season starts for 2024. We'll be able to recap scores and events coming out of the weekend and just basically everything that we missed over the previous week of disc golf. So welcome to the show. My name is Christopher Smith. I am the creator and owner of Disc Smith Disc Golf. So if you follow me on social media, you've seen it. If you haven't, make sure to get out there and like, subscribe, follow, all those things. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. That's basically it. That's basically it for right now. But these shows will be put into podcast format on all the podcasts that I can find. So plan is to put it on Spotify, Apple, Google, all those things. So be looking forward to that coming out. It is February 5th, 2024. Right now it's about 8:45 a.m. Kicking this off a little bit later in the morning than I had hoped, but earlier than expected. So for me personally, whenever I decide, like, for instance, when I decided I was going to start a YouTube channel for disc golf in general, from the day I said I'm doing that to the day I posted my first video, it probably took me about 6 to 8 weeks. Had to get the logo made, had to get all the marketing done, get the social channel, like all that stuff. I have a really, I don't want to say habit, but for me, when I decide to do something, I want to make sure everything's nice and smooth and ready to go. I don't want to just wing stuff. Complete opposite here. For this podcast, I'm winging it. I don't have a script. I don't have anything. So first show is going to be rough, but stick with me, and I greatly appreciate you guys. The reason I wanted to do this was because if you do follow my social media, I just played my first tournament, so I figured instead of doing a dedicated video talking about that, we'll put that up as one of the agenda items on the podcast. So the way this is going to run for us, what I want to do is kind of hit three quick items on the pro scene, or just disc golf in general. I want to give 3 quick headlines, and then we'll hop into like the story of the day or the main topic of the day, and then we'll close. So let's talk about a few scores that we saw. I was following social media, and I had seen somewhere on Facebook, something said that Terry Miller, the disc golf guy, had a really hot round at the Samui Swine Classic in the MP40 division. And I've been looking as hard as I could for 15 minutes this morning. The 15 minutes I had, I cannot find any scores related to MP40. I'm on the PDGA Live website right now. It would probably help if I could show you this, but again, I don't have the podcast. I don't have my system here set up to share that screen very well, so unfortunately I can't do that. But just talking through scores real quick, I'm unable to find it. So if you guys do find it, and especially if you're watching this on YouTube, let me know down in the comments. I was trying to catch up on that, but let's talk about a few other scores. The 46th New Zealand National Championships, Corey Ellis takes that down with a staggering 25 under with his closest competitor, Luke Humphreys, at 18 under. So great shooting, Corey Ellis, 25 under. That's crazy. And then honorable mention for third, Dylan Feldman. Switching over to the FPO side, Juliana Korver, 6 under, Zoe Andyke, 5, and their next closest competitor, 19 over. So Juliana and Zoe really went out there, and it looked like the third and fourth place are both from New Zealand based on the flag. So JK and Zoe going over there and really dominating that tournament. All right, and then we'll head over and talk about the 19th Open at Tallahassee, sponsored by Visit Tallahassee. Now, I lived in Florida for 15 years. I've only been to Tallahassee a couple times. Never heard of Visit Tallahassee. So obviously that's probably some sort of local parks and recreation or tourism type deal that they sponsor that event. So that's pretty cool. But Nathan Queen took down the MPO field. It looks like actually him and Ezra Robinson were tied for first. Now I'm assuming that being an open division that they had to have a playoff. It does have Nathan listed in first, even though they're tied. So again, honorable mention to Braden Sides. Names sound somewhat familiar, but not very. So, I'm sorry. Nathan and Ezra both shot 18 under in regulation, and Braden shot 16 under. So, great there. Another name that we see here, fourth place, Albert Tom. I forget how to pronounce it. Switching over to the FPO side, Stacy Kiefer 12 under, Sarah Hokum 12 under. Now it has Stacy listed on top, so again, I'm assuming they had a playoff. I'll get better at digging into these things as this goes, hopefully. And then Holly Finley pulling up third, so good to see her up there. I'm really excited for this season's FPO. I know Kristen Tatar has been dominating, and I love watching Kristen, but I like parity in sports. I know a lot of people say that, and sometimes they don't mean it, but I really do. I'm really looking, bookmark this, I'm looking for Holland Hanley this year to get a big win. All right, and then coming down, well, like I said, I looked into the Samui Swine Classic, was unable to find anything. I can see FA1 scores, MA40, all the Masters, MA40, 50, 60, MA2, MA3. Not seeing anything for any sort of open division. So unless it's listed under something else, then I just don't see it. All right, and then we'll hop into our main topic for today. I want to talk about my first ever tournament. So again, if you follow me on social media, you probably saw me post it. I decided that I don't want to give the whole history of my disc golf thing. I'll do that separately, but I started in 2021 and I had played a biop in 2021, 22, and 23. Those are all my tournament experience come from those 3 biop entries playing with my friend. And this year I decided that I really did want to start playing some solo events. I want to get, a rating and just see how I can do and have some fun. So a local event popped up at the last second last week, and I signed up for it. It was the Fairborn Challenge in Fairborn, Ohio. If you're not familiar with it, Fairborn, Ohio is a suburb of Dayton, Ohio. It's right next to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Actually, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is in Fairborn. So anyways, it's a great park. It's actually one of the courses that was part of that biop that I played last summer. And I signed up for that, and I did sign up for the MA40 division. I'll be 40 this summer. I wasn't sure where to sign up. I was struggling between MA2 and MA40, and I almost sent the TD an email just letting them know, like, hey, I'm signing up for MA40, but if it helps the flow of the event or whatever, like, I'm fine playing MA2. It's the same layout and whatnot, and I just wanted to play. So I had signed up and set my goals. What do I want and expect out of my first tournament? I wanted to go out there and shoot as good as I could, obviously, but my main goal was to finish, right? Sounds like a stupid goal to have, right? To finish. Like, you should be able to do that, but I come from a running background. I used to run a lot of races in my 30s and late 20s. Well, I don't want to say a lot, but I ran enough, and I think most people will tell you, especially if you get into long distance running, your first goal needs to just be to finish. You should not be worrying about your score, in that case, your run time at all. Get out there and finish. That way you're getting yourself used to being in that scenario. It's more about that and being able to build on that in future events than what it is about what you do specifically in that event. So that was my goal. I woke up nice and early Saturday morning, and I went out to my local home course, Wright State University. And it's right next to it's actually in Fairborn as well. So those two, if you're local, those two courses right next to each other. But holes 9 through 11, really nice wide open field, and I got out there and threw some drives, got my arm warmed up, did some putting. My putting for my casual rounds the last month and a half since I got back from Florida has been absolutely atrocious. My putting's been so bad, so I was really worried about the putting. But my putting during that warm-up was great. So got warmed up, felt good, and I got to the course about 15 minutes ahead of time before the check-in started. And I sat in my car for about 30 minutes, just trying to relax and, get all the feelings out of everything and just be like, hey, let's just go out here and have some fun. And I did, and they started me off on hole 17, and the guys that I played with, I want to give you their names if I could, just in case anyone local is watching. I was on a card with John, Tyree, JT. There was another John, I want to say his last name's Lanning. I think it was John Lanning, and then Steven, and I'm sorry if I butcher your last name, Drozdek, I believe is how it's pronounced. And my buddy knows most of them in the first place. There are some names that I've seen on some local social media around here as well. And really great guys. Great card. We had a lot of fun. Everyone was cool. So that really helped myself out being in my first tournament, just having a card that, there wasn't someone that was throwing bad and like breaking down and then making it weird. We were just a group of 40-plus-year-old dudes out there throwing frisbees, so we had a great time. But we start on 17, and I'm listed to go third. JT gets up there first, and he absolutely parks his shot. And now hole 17 here, it's a par 3. It's probably around the 280, 300 mark. I wish I had this pulled up for you. Like I said, we're winging it today, but he force flexes something overstable up the hill and through all these narrow trees. Now, before anyone threw, I had already decided I'm throwing my elevation banks on this hole, even though it's a disc I don't use much anymore. I was like, I cannot hit a tree and go into these woods. It's a heavily wooded course and be scrambling all day. So I made my mind up that if I get into a super wooded situation, the banks is coming out. But yeah, JT parked his shot. The other John threw up there. I think JT was about 7 feet from the basket. He should have got CTP, but we kind of forgot about it. And then the other John shot. He was somewhere in circle one, and then I threw third. The Binks is not really meant for that because it's uphill and you need to finish left. The Binks is a little understable for that, but I wanted that more so than anything else. So anyways, I threw my Bink straight up the hill. It turned a little bit more than I wanted, kicked off a tree, probably put me somewhere deep into circle two. But I had a pretty solid look, so a little forehand flick put me right underneath the basket. I was able to tap out a par, so that right there alone, starting off with a par, made me feel so good. I was like, okay, cool, like, I haven't embarrassed myself. We can play here. Like, it's just disc golf. You do this literally every single day. It's just disc golf, so let's go. Move up to hole 18. They had this playing as a par 3 as well for the tournament, which I like. It was a par 4 last summer during the buy-op, and it was in the short pin. For this tournament, it was in the middle pin, so it was a little bit longer. And I'm sorry, no, I'm wrong. It was a par 4 because I got a 4 on it. Spoiler alert. But yeah, I step up there. Again, tee order didn't change. Now, because it was in the middle pin, I usually throw my entropy there, a putter. I decided to go up to a mid-range, and I threw it. And the moment I let go of the disc, I was like, oh no, that's really good, right? It was crazy. I was like, that's a really good drive, and it's just going straight. I'm like, okay, well, you got to start fading. It's an overstable mid-range, and there's one tree you had to beat, and it just did not fade in time. I squared that tree straight up. Disc fell straight down. So I'm about halfway down the fairway, and I'm like, okay, this isn't a problem. And this is where I made my biggest mistake that actually did not bite me, so I got lucky. I stepped up to my lie. I'm first to take my second shot, and you can't see the basket from where I'm at, and I didn't want to hold up the group and, walk 50 feet up there and look at my shot. Huge mistake, right? I know anyone that's listening is like, you idiot. I was thinking the same thing right after I threw my shot. I took my proxy and I threw it out there on a little Anheuser forehand line trying to get the coast over. And the moment I let go, I was like, you should have went up there and checked your shot. But I let go of it. And I was like, okay, well, that's good. That's, it's playing as a par 4. That should be up there far enough to where I can at least lay up and tap out a par. But I get up to that lie to take my third shot, and I'm still probably only about 75% up the fairway. I probably got about 100 feet to go, and it's wooded. It's not like in a great spot. I had hit a log, so there was this little hill you had to get over, and there was a tree that was down on it. And it hit that to where I was trying to get it to go over that, and it just hit it and stopped there. So anyways, I stepped up with my Watt, which is, if you watch my In the Bag video, it's not a disc I use a whole lot, especially for an upshot. But I needed something just to go dead straight and get down to the basket. And I threw that, and it did a really good job, and it hit a tree. I'm sorry that I'm trying to give you visuals on this, and I can't pull up video or photos to show you what it looked like, but the pin itself is right outside of the woods, so it's in an open area, but I hit like the last tree, and I left myself about a 15 to 18 foot putt, I would say, on the second hole of the tournament for me. So a little bit of a nervy putt, and I had to go straddle stance on that one, which is not my preferred putting. I like a stagger stance, not straddle, but I was able to nail down that putt, and I honestly think that right there, facing a little bit of adversity on hole number 2 for me of that tournament and having to hit a somewhat tester putt for me in my first tournament, honestly think set me up for some success in that, because I hit that putt and then I was like, oh, like that, that went in. That matched my putts during my warm-up session this morning. That was really good. So anyways, we're able to move on to our third hole, which is hole number 1 at the course. Really a tough hole. It's a par 3, uphill all the way. You start from the open area out in the field, but you throw into the woods. And I just said, I'm just taking my Tesla here, which is a pretty neutral 9-speed driver, and I'm pumping it as hard as I can. If it fades early, okay, that's fine. If it burns over, that's fine. If for some reason I lace it and it goes straight, I might have a chance at birdie. It's a par 3. have never birdied that hole even in casual rounds. And I threw it a little bit hard, burn it over, but I got the majority of the distance. Like the distance was fine. I was sitting in a spot probably just outside of circle 2 where I could forehand flick my entry up there, tap out par. No need to talk anymore about that hole. We get to our 4th hole. Now I'm even through 3, right? We get to our 4th hole. Tee order has not changed at this point. I'm throwing 3rd, I do believe. I'm throwing 3rd, and this hole number 2 at this course, always bites me. It's a really long shot. The pin is on the left side. There's you have a long wooded tunnel, and there's a pin to the right, pin to the left. It's in the left pin, thankfully. But all my practice rounds last summer playing that course, I always hit a tree early, and I'm 80 feet off the tee and scrambling, and it's not good. You don't want that. So I told myself, you said if you got into this kind of scenario, you're throwing the binks. So I forced myself to throw the binks, and it narrowly misses first available and gets around it and just absolutely crushes it. Now, JT had thrown first off the tee, and he force flexed. He was force flexing a lot of shots, and they were looking really good. He was down there probably 40 to 50 feet, circle 2, 40, 50 feet. And I was probably about 15, 20 feet behind him. Now, this is playing as a par 4. It's a pretty long hole, too. And I got up there with my koi, and even your upshot from there, it's a little tricky because the pin's on a hill. Right, so this hill slides from the left to the right the way I'm facing. So my disc coming down the opposite to, I don't want to catch edge, but I have the koi, the rubber putter, and I just throw it up there flat, lands on the ground, tap out birdie, right? So great way to get a birdie. I didn't even have to putt it. You could just tap it out. We've played 4 holes, and I'm 1 under. I'm feeling great. We move on, and this one is a tricky shot. This is a really hard dogleg left, and there's 2 trees about 40 feet off the tee pad on the left and right of the tee pad. So you have to throw in between these 2 trees. If you hit your gap, you're probably got a pretty good chance at getting up and down for a birdie. If you miss that gap, you are in big, big trouble. So I pulled out my Thought Space Athletics Coalesce, a nice solid overstable 9-speed driver, threw it about 80% power, and just right out the middle. The moment it came out of my hand, I was like, man, that's my best drive on this hole ever. And it was. We got up to my lie, and we had a little bit of a delay. I don't want to go into details on that because it's not important. But I got up to my lie for my second shot, and I was like, man, this is I could almost run this, with my koi. Now there's a little bit of trees to get through, so I told myself, hey, birdie is great. Like you don't need some miracle eagle. So I just kind of laid up my entry on a little forehand flick and left myself a 10-foot putt, took down my second birdie. So now we're on a birdie train. Now we're rolling, right? We get up to hole number 4 on the course, hole 6 for us. And this one is almost one of the must-get birdies. It's a little bit long. I think it's about 385. You got OB right, which shouldn't come into play unless you kick off something or unless you kind of have 2 paths to go on this. So if you can visualize off the tee pad, you have a tree dead center. It's a pretty skinny tree. And the basket's dead center too. So you can either go out that left side gap and try to, flex something a little overstable, which is the play I chose to go with, or you can go out that right side gap and try to go pure hyzer, but you got to be able to push probably 380, 385. So I went with that coalesce again. I said I'm going left gap. I'm going to force flex this just a little bit, and that way I make sure it doesn't go over that OB on the right-hand side. And I threw it nose up, trying to be a little bit too safe. And it's halfway through its flight, and I remember this. I was the only person to birdie the previous hole, so I led the tee pad here. And we're halfway down the flight, and I'm starting to feel comfortable. I turn around, don't even finish watching it. I told the guys, I was like, yep, that doesn't have the distance. But it wasn't a bad shot. I was in circle 2. I probably had a 50-footer, maybe 45. And we get up to that lie, and I focus in on my putt, and I let it go, and I joke you not, it just crashed middle chains and went in. So, and again, the card I was on, the guys are all cool. Like, we're all cheering each other on. That went into the chains, and everyone's like, yeah, so felt really good, and it really did. To hit a big putt like that nice and early. Now, I think I'd have to go back in the scores. I think JT birdied that one, too. He had a pretty good drive. But if not, whatever, I'm sitting here, played 6 holes, I'm 3 down now, right? So I'm feeling really great. We're going to hole 5, which is the easiest hole on the course. Now, you're underneath some trees on this tee pad, but it's a 270-foot shot. You have OB right that shouldn't come into play unless you throw something flippy or just make a mistake. And then you do have OB 15 feet behind the basket. So that's the biggest concern. I threw my resistor and I played it a little bit tight and safe. And I found myself staring down about a 25-foot putt on this par 3, hole 5 on that course. And death putt too, pond right behind it. But I'm telling myself, like, hey, we can run this, right? Just give it a floaty soft bid. I putt with these rubber putters for this reason, that if I miss, it's not going in that water. Bookmark that comment for later on. So I give it a soft bid and I miss it. I miss it to the right much more than I expected to, and I'm nervous this disc is going in the water, but it stopped a couple feet from the water, and I was able to hit the 15-foot comeback putt, which that right there, I was like, ooh, like, you know, that almost bit me. But we're still good. We've played 7 holes. I'm 3 under. Moving on to hole 6 on the course. This one's a really fun hole. It's a wooded shot kind of the whole way, 350-ish foot, pinned down on the right on the edge of a creek bed. Now, the only thing that was playing OB on this hole was if you were surrounded by water, but I had to throw my first forehand power shot of the day, and I literally told the guys, I was like, I apologize that you guys are gonna have to witness this wobbly forehand, but I pulled out my time lapse and I threw it, and that time lapse is so nice. It looked like I knew what I was doing, and it flew up the middle of the fairway. Now, I did hit a tree in the middle. No, all 4 of us, no one got more than halfway down the fairway. A couple guys got in trouble early off the left side of the tee pad on backhands. I was the only one to throw forehand there, I believe. I'm almost certain. But yeah, me and JT were kind of in the middle of the fairway. And from there, I was able to throw a forehand with my entropy and get underneath the basket. I had a tap out 3 there, and I was feeling great. I'm like, oh, cool, I'm 4 down now. But that hole was playing as a par 3, and it really should, because you can get underneath the basket. You can get literally underneath the basket with a pretty solid drive, and I've done it myself a couple times in casual rounds. So it really should be a par 3. So I was okay taking a par there. We get up to hole 7, and this is where, if you're local or if you've played this course before, this is where Stank Creek comes into play, and I've got T-pad. So this is kind of a pretty wide fairway that you want to throw a placement shot off of. This plays as a par 4. You got about 250 feet, I would say, maybe even a little bit less, to kind of throw just a straight shot, and then you have to do a 90-degree turn to the right and throw over the creek to the basket. So I went with my entropy, which is the play I always do there, and I went forehand. That way I could kind of throw it out to the left and get it to fade back towards the creek, but not, you know, with it being a putter, not worry about it too much. But I burnt my drive over. It was a little bit short and a lot left of where I wanted to be. I was by far the shortest drive of my card, and I stepped up to that shot, and I told myself, remember, it's tournament. Pars are okay. This is a par 4. So instead of trying to get it, and I stepped up to my lie, I was like, man, there's a line there. I could take like my resistor or maybe even my pyro and just force flex this little gap and get it across there and have a shot at birdie. I was like, nope, not doing that. I'm not taking the penalty, and 2, I'm not losing a disc in that creek, because it is disgusting. You're not getting it back unless you're lucky, and you may not even want it back because it stinks. But I told everyone they were all going to walk past and go up to their lie so they could see things. I was like, well, hold on just a second, because I'm just literally pitching 40 feet in front of me to the edge of that creek bed so I can, you know, lay up, tap out, let's move on. And I did. My layup was perfectly fine. Other guys moved up to their spots, and I went up to take my third shot to cross this creek. It's probably a 50, 60 foot get across, and then the pin is right on the edge of the creek, probably within 10 feet of it, and I duff it. I absolutely duff it. I took my koi. So instead of doing an entropy forehand shot, upshot like I usually do to get across, I was a little bit worried with it being that short, that trying to go forehand, that I would botch the shot. So I went backhand, and I tried to kind of force flex over my rubber putter, and I put it nose up. It ran out of steam a little bit early, and I'm like a foot in the water. So I threw a provisional forehand perfectly, like I should have done in the first place. And this is what bit me. I tried to play the hole too safe, and maybe I'll recap that at the end. But anyways, we get up there, cross the creek. I told the guys, like, yeah, forget about the provisional. That my first shot was OB for sure. So I ended up making my putt and taking a double bogey. First mistake of the day that really bit me, right? So I just had to recollect myself and say, hey, let's keep playing smart, but let's not play too safe, because if I am going to get OBs and penalties, I at least want them to have a chance to be something good. I don't want to take an OB from a layup. That was ridiculous. I shouldn't have done that. And that was the one big mistake on the day that I really, really regretted. But it's okay. We move on to hole 8, which is a throwback across the creek the other way. And again, they moved this pin. This pin used to be over on the left-hand side to where you could throw across the creek as a right-hand backhand player. 280, I would say, on the distance. But the pin wasn't there. Pin was on the right, on the edge of the creek bed, and I had just been in that creek. So I said, I don't care. I'm not even trying to birdie this. I'm not messing. I'm not going forehand that fades back towards the creek. I'm not going understable that burns towards the creek. I took my Viking disc Warrior, which is like a 4402 disc, and just threw a straight fade shot. It ended up hitting a tree on the other side and laying down in a good spot, and I was able to forehand flick my entropy up there underneath the basket, tap out par on hole number 8, which is our 10th hole? That is our 10th hole. So at this point, I'm sitting, if my math is correctly, I think I'm 1 under because I was 3 under, and then I took that double bogey. And we go to hole 9, which is actually a pretty tough hole, and everyone struggled to get off the tee pad there, and I'm throwing last due to that double bogey. And I step up in my time lapse, and I absolutely lace a backhand shot to my own surprise. Best drive I've ever had on hole 9 on that course. Sitting in the middle of the fairway. By the time I get up to my lie, they had moved this to the short pin spot. So there's a long pin that's up on a hill on the edge of a creek, but it's really muddy during the wintertime. So they moved that down inside the trees. And I had a little gap on the right-hand side that all I had to do was throw an entropy on backhand through. Solid entropy. And I did, and I let it go. And I was like, oh, yeah, that is great. Like, this is probably my biggest weakness in disc golf is the short backhand approach shot. I am not good at it. I've relied too much on my forehand shot. But anyways, I throw that and I let go of it. I'm like, that's so good. And no one says anything. And I get up to my next, and I'm walking up here. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm an idiot. Like I thought that basket was much further up than what it was. I threw it way too hard. Now it still was a good shot. I cleared the gap, didn't hit anything, and I had a 60-foot putt, but that was a par 4, so I somewhat squandered a chance to get a stroke back on that hole, but I had a stress-free par, so wasn't upset about it. Moving on to hole 10 on the course. Hole 10, again, a lot of these holes that generally have OB lines painted on them, we're playing only OB if you're surrounded by water, and that's the case with hole 10. It has a creek in the middle of it. Now, since there wasn't OB, I almost talked myself into throwing a time-lapse forehand to try to push this hole all the way. I want to say it's about a 380-foot hole, and this actually bends to the right. So I was like, I could try with the time-lapse to really push this and get up there, but I was like, there's ain't no point in doing that because I don't know if there is water. There's a little creek in the middle that sometimes has water, sometimes doesn't, and it said surrounded by water is OB, so I said, I don't know what's up there, not risking it. So I just took a resistor and just laid up a forehand right before that creek. Perfect shot. Went to that lie to take my second shot. This is a par 4 as well. Went to take my forehand pyro up shot, and it was good too, but it just got a bad skip at the end. It put me at about 35, 40 foot for a birdie putt, which I missed. Tap out par on hole 10 of the course. So moving on. Hole 11, which is the Superman hole there. Yeah, Superman hole. So this is a par 5. It's about 700 feet, maybe 650 or something like that. Super wooded. Again, I'm still last on the tee pad due to that double bogey a few holes back, and at least I think I am. I'm definitely not first. Everyone's struggling to get off this tee pad because it's super wooded. It's a really tough hole if you're familiar with the course. I went with a time-lapse forehand again and just absolutely laced it. Now, I will admit, and I said this the moment I threw it, everyone's like, oh my gosh, like nice shot when I threw that. And I sarcastically said, I was like, yeah, that's exactly the line I was looking for, because there was one big opening, and I was trying to throw it through these trees. And then just to the right of that, there was a small opening, and it went through that. So I sawed it off just a little bit early, but still ended up being by far one of my best shots that I've ever had on that hole, and it put me right in the middle of the fairway, and I made up my mind at that point, this is a par 5, and I'm already 50% up the fairway. I was like, I'm going flex forehand with this time-lapse for my upshot, and I don't care. Like, there was a cameraman sitting down there by a basket. I was like, hey, he knows what he's doing. He's kind of sitting behind a tree. But anyways, it gets up to be my turn, and I go for that shot, and Lo and behold, I burnt that over into a cut roller. Now, I did get the majority of the distance out of the way, so it was okay, but I was worried because, you know, you do have woods, honeysuckle type shrubbery on both sides of the fairway, which I got into the edge of, but I was only sitting at like maybe 40 feet from the basket, so I was able to just flick up an entropy, which almost went in and was underneath the basket for a tap out birdie. So we're back on course here now. Right now, I'm back to 2 under, going to hole 12 on the course, hole 14 for the tournament for me. And this is the one hole. You go back and watch my in the bag video that I did where I said there'll be one hole I might throw a forehand synapse on. And it was going to be this hole. Hole 12 is really tough. Right off the tee pad, you have a Mando stick on the right-hand side of you, so you have to be left of that. You got OB left out in the field past the sidewalk, which shouldn't come into play unless you throw a really overstable disc or a really big hyzer. But you have trees lining your entire, like these tall Christmas trees lining the entire fairway to the right, and the basket is in that line of trees. So if you're really good at disc golf, what I would want to do is throw that forehand out there and try to get the fade back towards that. I didn't want to risk that because that OB only from earlier was in my mind, so I just stepped up with a zenith, and I was like, I'm going to throw this on a hyzer because it can turn over on me if you're not careful. Well, I was like, if it doesn't turn over for me or flip up at all, it'll be fine on a pure hyzer. Like, it's not going to get to OB on the left. And that's exactly what happened. I threw a hyzer out there. I left myself with a 180-foot upshot. Textbook stuff, shouldn't be a problem. Went with the entropy, threw it a little bit too hard trying to throw a straight shot. I wanted to put a little bit of speed on it to get the flip up and go straight to the basket instead of trying to have to like hyzer or turn anything over. And it hit right past the basket, maybe 10 feet past the basket, but just the way it hit the ground stuff, it rolled out there to a 30-foot putt. And this is a par 3. This is a 435-foot hole in total. So par 3, I'm stepping up to try to save a par from just outside circle 1, and this is where I made my second mistake on the day. Is I should have laid it up. I have played this hole too many times with this basket being on the hill the way that it is, that even putting with my elevation coys, they catch edge and roll away. It's happened to me several times in the past. I missed my comeback par putt and left myself enough distance putting uphill to be uncomfortable, and just hit the rim, or the basket, the bottom of the basket. I was a little bit short on my bogey putt, hits the hill, and rolls away. So now I'm looking at putting 5, and it's not an easy putt because it rolled away. Now I'm staring down a 20-foot double bogey putt, and luckily I made that because that could have been the wheels completely falling off. But finishing hole 12 on the course, hole 14 for the tournament for me, I am now even, right? So now I'm sitting here thinking we're going back into the woods to finish holes 13 through 16, which is all woods on hills. Thinking, how do I get through these 4 holes without making another mistake? Because I really want to get out of here even. We get to hole 13. I told myself before I threw, I'm taking my time lapse and I'm throwing a super flex anhyzer forehand. I was like, if I overflex it, don't care. If I underflex it, those trees will kick me back out to the edge of the fairway. Like, that's my most guaranteed way to get a par on this hole. And I put myself in a really good position into the edge of circle 2 and ran a putt to try to get an eagle and just hit a tree that's like a foot from the basket. Well, probably about 3 feet from the basket. But anyways, I'm sitting there underneath the basket for an easy tap out birdie. I'm like, that'll give me a little bit of breathing room to get through these last few holes and get out of here either even or better. And we step up to hole 14. And this is where I really turn things on, in my opinion. This is a pure uphill shot with the basket on the right, probably realistically 300 feet, and probably plays like 380. And I took my Tesla and I threw it out there on a little bit of a nose up flex forehand, and I got myself into circle 2 staring down an eagle putt on this par 4, and I hit a lucky putt. I went to take my putt and I left it a little bit low and a little bit left, but it just hit a chain and went into the basket, and I was able to pull down not only an eagle but the only non-par on that hole of my card. So that gave me a confidence boost. And we go into the last 2 holes, and I'll finish my long-winded story here. We go into the last 2 holes. So hole 15 on the course is typically one of the easiest holes on the course, even though it's wooded. It's generally like a 240-ish foot downhill par 4, according to the course sign, which should be a par 3. but they moved the pin down to the long left pin that I had never played before. I've never even seen that pin have a basket in it before. And this is playing closer to, this is more like a realistic 300-foot shot, but it probably plays, like that 260-ish due to the hill. And we're sitting here with 2 cards in front of us waiting on the tee pad. So we had a really long backup because of this hole, because not only is that pin down there to the left, after you tap out or after you hole out, you have to walk back up the fairway a little bit and cross in front to go over to hole 16. So that's why there was a slowdown there. But the good news is I got to watch all these other guys. I got to watch 8 guys throw their tee shots on here and kind of say, okay, well, how did their shots go? And after watching them, I was like, yeah, I'm going Fireball here, which if you're not familiar with the Axiom Fireball, it's a Firebird. It's that 9.3.5 or 9.403 type super overstable control driver. And I'm on the tee box to that Eagle, and I just threw a really beautiful flat downhill Fireball shot, skips probably 20 feet before the basket, maybe 50, skips before the basket and flares the chains and just misses it. Leaves me a 5-foot comeback birdie. So now I've gone birdie, eagle, birdie, got myself 4 back under par to go into the last hole. Obviously feeling great. And hole 16 is even easier than hole 15. It's one of the easiest holes on the course. It's a short par 3, maybe 220-ish, 230-ish generally, but it was in the harder pin that I hadn't played in a while. It was on the right-hand side pin. So where I would typically throw an envy there for a straight to fade finish downhill, I went with my Pyro because I needed to finish right. Not even right. It's almost a straight shot, but just a little bit right. So I just flexed my Pyro down there on a forehand, absolutely parked it underneath the basket. That was my best shot of the day. It was literally touching the collar. So I was able to go birdie, eagle, birdie, birdie, and get back to 5 under, which made me feel good about that tournament. And my adrenaline was running high. I didn't tell anyone on that card until the tee box of that last hole that was my first solo tournament. And even one of the guys was like, "That's your first tournament?" I was like, "Well, I do have some tournament experience. I played the buy-op the last few years, but yeah, this is my first solo tournament." And the reason why I even told them that was just to let them know, like, hey, like, you guys are really cool. Like, I didn't have to, like, no one was stressing out. Even when people were struggling, we were all making jokes. It was just having a good time. And I think that's probably the most reason that I'm happy that I signed up for the MA40 division, because, if you get out there with some younger guys, I don't know if that's the case. Most of us were probably all old dads and just disc golf nerds. So it was a lot of fun. I was able to finish out, like I said, 5 under. Ended up tying me for third. I think first place, shout out John Cox. He's well known around here. He had 10 under. I apologize if I have this wrong. Let's pull it up real quick. Fairborn Challenge. That was the name of the tournament if you're interested in looking at it. So in the MA40 division, John Cox shot a 10 under, bogey-free round. Scott Jenkins, who's also well known in the area, shot a 8 under for second place with only 2 bogeys. It looks like. Let me just scroll this out just to make sure. Yeah, two single bogeys. And then myself finished 5 under. The person behind me, Lauren Barnhurst, was 4 under, so right on my tail. And then JT, who was on my card, was in 5th place. But yeah, I shot a 5 under. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with 7 birdies. So I was super. If you had told me, hey, you're gonna have 7 birdies, I'd be like, wow. I wouldn't have thought that. Like, I'm not trying to blow up my own spot. I just know from my game that I played really well relative to how I am able to play. Again, I had those 2 double bogeys, so that was what was killing me, right? Because even if I just par those out, especially that hole 7 that I just duffed a 50-foot upshot into a creek, if I don't do that, my problem with that hole was I was so focused on trying to make sure I landed underneath the pin to where I wouldn't have to putt out for par. That was what was in my mind. Like, this has to be close. Like, because if I'm not close, I don't want to stress a par putt and miss and go bogey. That I didn't focus enough on making sure I got across, and I focused too much on trying to be too close to the pin. I should have focused on getting across. A 5 would have been better than a 6. Check me if my math's wrong. But that one, and then again, hole 12. Those were the 2 mental mistakes. Those were 3 mental mistakes. I just got lucky on hole number 18, the second hole of the tournament, that the other mental mistake I made that I talked about earlier didn't bite me. But yeah, that is pretty much how my first ever tournament went. Like I said, it was super exciting for me. If you do follow the social media and my YouTube channel, obviously I posted a video about it. I did have to wait afterwards for the announcements and the payouts and stuff to happen. When I first finished, my emotions were running high. If I had recorded the video, I even said in the video I did record that, I was like, I probably been on the verge of tears. Like I was so ecstatic and I had such good feelings about that tournament. And I can't wait to do it again. But I'll quit nerding out about it. If you followed along through my entire long story, I greatly appreciate you. But that's going to wrap it up for our first episode. So let me know down in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. If you don't have a way to directly interact with this, if you're listening through any podcast service or anything and you want to get in touch with me, you can always reach out to me at my email. It is discsmithdiscgolf@gmail.com. So if you're not familiar with the channel, Disc Smith is just like a blacksmith, right? Disc Smith, Disc Golf. No special characters, nothing like that. Just pretty straightforward stuff. You can always Google it, and that'll wrap it up, guys. I do greatly appreciate everyone tuning in as always. If you are following on YouTube, if you wouldn't mind, please feel free to give the video a like. It'll greatly help out the channel. If you're not subscribed, make sure to do so and turn on those notifications. And from the podcast platform, I appreciate everyone tuning in, and we will see you next week.